Hello and welcome back to Total Conflict Resistance. Today I want to talk a little bit about what do I expect from the game after its official release. So when the demo phase is over, what do I want to be included in the game? What bit would be great that the game would have? I don't want to talk so much about the battle aspect because I think the battle is already pretty great and they fixed a lot of bugs that were an issue earlier. But right now the battle is fun, and I'm not going to talk about that too much. I do want to talk about more about the campaign map, and there are three specific things I want to talk about, which is number one, military. What can be improved in the military on the campaign map? What can be added to the military? The second thing I want to talk about is resources. I would like to see resources added to the game. I get to that a little bit later, why that is. And the third thing I want to talk about is politics. That should also be a very important aspect to the game. So, those are the three main pillars I want to talk about today. So, starting off with military, so we already have artillery now added to the battles, which is great and fun, and we can definitely leave it that way. But really, if you think about it, that is not very realistic the way it's done right now. Because in real life, you would not take your artillery with you to the front lines when invading a city or confronting an enemy out on an open field, but you would much rather leave your artillery many miles behind the front lines where they are safe, and then have your artillery give you artillery support. So I would suggest that in addition to the way it is now, where you control the artillery in battles like you would any other unit, I would like to have an artillery observer in my battalion and be able to call in artillery strikes like you can do in many other games, like Steel Division, for example, or Company of Heroes. So you can select maybe a building where you expect enemy troops and have your artillery bomb it for you. So another thing I'd like to see is that on the campaign map, I want to see my artillery being able to destroy enemy infrastructure so the enemy will run out of supplies and ultimately have to just surrender or retreat. You actually see that very effectively being done in conflicts in the world today, and it shows you how even a smaller army can deal huge blows to a bigger army by using artillery in an intelligent way. And the third thing I want artillery being able to do in this game is just shell a city and heavily decrease the manpower and morale of any units stationed there, so you can simply send your forces in and save yourself heavy losses. Again, you see this done right now in the world in conflicts. So, this is how wars are being fought, and therefore, it only makes sense that the devs would implement that in the game. But of course, you would have to reposition your artillery every once in a while, or the enemy would find out their position and destroy them with their own artillery. Also, you would have to construct stationary anti aircraft or build AA vehicles like a Patriot missile system to protect your artillery from enemy aircraft. That's right, and that brings me to the next point, which is airplanes. You should be able to build airfields and use airplanes in a similar fashion as you would the artillery. And that is number one, call in airstrikes during battles. Number two, bomb enemy cities or units. Number three, destroy supply lines or infrastructure like roads and bridges, and therefore cutting off any supplies coming into the city, making your enemies having to retreat. Number four, have your fighters patrol your borders or your airspace to fight off enemy bombers. So that is definitely something that should be added to the game, the use and construction of airfields and anti-aircraft. I think that makes sense because what is a war today without an air force, anyways? And imagine you could build rocket silos like you can in Hearts of Iron 4, for example, and launch rockets into enemy territory. And in return, you can build a defense system like the Iron Dome Israel has got and Germany is thinking of getting to defend from those rocket attacks. Now, those would, of course, be huge projects in the game and would maybe be completed in the end game phase. And that would actually make the end game interesting again. Another thing that would be nice to see would be naval bases. So you could station warships near enemy coasts and do some coastal bombardment. Again, similar to what you can see in Hearts of Iron 4. Maybe even aircraft carriers to launch a surprise attack on the enemy. Now, to destroy those enemy ships, you'd have to build anti ship weapons, like you can see in Wargame Red Dragon. Or you could use airplanes, but the ship's AA guns could definitely inflict some heavy damages on your planes. No, I'm not talking about, making huge ship battles, don't get me wrong. It's more like simulations, what I'm hoping for here. Another thing I'd like to see added to the game are recon units, because right now you can simply see all of the enemy units on the map, the ones close by, anyways. It would be more realistic if you'd have to station recon units on your borders, fly spy planes across rivaling countries, or use drones to spot the enemy. Now, I will get into politics later in the video, but wouldn't it be cool to be able to recruit spies and infiltrate enemy countries? Those spies can give you information about enemy movement, which of your cities are they planning to attack, what technologies the enemy is researching, and so on. One last thing I want to talk about concerning military mechanics in this game is military commanders. I would love to be able to choose between different generals, each with their own special abilities, like an artillery commander that gives you 10% accuracy on your artillery units, for example, or a recon commander that improves your chances of spotting enemy troops by 20%. Because right now, all you have is that random photo here in the corner, and even though I'm sure the devs certainly have something up their sleeves, I just hope they will give us this in depth experience with many commanders to choose from, internal power disputes, and random events popping up to make the game more engaging and ultimately more exciting. Now, let's talk a little bit about resources. What do I mean by that? Now, obviously, wars many times are fought over resources, and why should it be any different in total conflict resistance? I mean, what are we shooting at each other for, anyways, right? To me, it would be awesome if any country would have a certain amount of resources which you could capture from your enemies, like oil and gas fields, steel producing areas and factories, or mines where rare minerals are being harvested. Kind of like you can see in Hearts of Iron 4. So instead of just capturing cities, you would be capturing critical infrastructure as well from your enemy, and thereby crippling their economy. Now, these resources you would need in order to build tanks and airplanes and so on. Without those resources, you would not be able to go to war. Simple as that. Now, of course, you would be able to trade those resources with your allies. If your country is rich in oil, for example, but poor in iron, you could trade with an iron rich country. Now, the devs already announced that there would be alliances and trade added, but I hope it is not only here I trade 100 RPGs for two tanks or something like that. I want an in depth, realistic game, don't you? Now, you might have heard in the news a while back that Turkey and Greece were fussing about gas fields in the Mediterranean Sea. In total conflict, you should also be able to capture offshore gas fields from your enemy and patrol the waters with your navy. I don't expect no navy battles, don't get me wrong. Nothing fancy, just a simple simulation like you see in other games would be good enough for me. I mean, wouldn't it be awesome if you could send a prospecting ship out to discover offshore oil and gas fields and claim them for your nation before the enemy does? I would love to see something like that added to the game. Another resource in the game, and don't laugh, could be water. Because water in the future, and the game plays a little ways in the future, anyways, will be a rare resource in many parts of the world. So one country could have a fresh water lake, for example, which, if captured, could give, for example, a huge morale bonus for the country that captures it. So let's talk about the third pillar, which is politics. Now, we all know that wars are not fought only with guns, but there's actually a lot more going on behind the scenes. So, politics should also be an important part in this game. Important enough so that your politicians or your political decisions could actually decide the way the war is turning in the game. So, what do I mean by that? For example, you could have a very smart and capable foreign minister negotiating a ceasefire for you when you see that you're losing. That would give you time to regroup and fill your ranks back up, you see? So before the enemy comes and captures your last city, for example, your politicians could negotiate a ceasefire or a peace treaty and save your butts from being wiped off the map by a superior army. Also, your foreign minister should be able, if you have him ranked up pretty good, to decrease the ceasefire time for your own nation. You see that in Crusader Kings 3. Remember, you got those ceasefires, and some one of your ministers, or what is it called in the game? I don't know, but he can actually, because he's skilled really good, he decreases the ceasefire time, and there you go, you can go and attack him again and don't have to wait for years and years. So that would be nice to see that in the game. That way, you can go and attack the enemy before he replenishes his units. Now, I served in the propaganda defense unit in the German military for a little while, so I know that another very important aspect in any war, maybe even the most important one, is propaganda. Why? Simple. Because if you don't have your population convinced of the necessity of the war you want them to fight in, they simply won't go and fight for you. And if you do get them to go, maybe by force, they'll have very low morale and maybe even surrender. Again, you see that happening in the ongoing conflict that is happening in the world right now. So, for total conflict, I suggest a mechanic where you have to get your fellow countrymen to on your side and make them believe in the actual cause you want them to fight and give their lives for. Also, you should be able to use your propaganda minister or propaganda agency to expose rivaling countries to your own ideologies and points of views, thereby decreasing their morale because they suddenly realized, hey, our country has been lying to us all this time. So when you shoot at them in battle, you won't even have to kill them, they will simply surrender. Now, that is what's happening in the world today. We can see that even a powerful army, if there's no morale, if they don't see no need to fight, then no matter how many weapons, no matter how many soldiers you got, you simply won't make it. And a small army with they believe in what they fight for, they will give their lives for it. They just won't retreat. Reminds me a little bit of Steel Division 2. You got those in the German army, you got there the fanatics. And they don't waver, they don't retreat. You shoot at them, they don't retreat. And then you got those other units that are like really cheap units, and my goodness, you just shoot at them one time and they just run off. So, kind of like this, using your propaganda agency to spread either lies or tell them the truth, either way, depending on which side you're fighting on. And thereby boosting the morale of your own troops or decreasing the morale of the enemy troops. Now, another thing politics or politicians should be good for is giving you perks for your resource production. Like I said, I'd like to see resources added to the game, and you could support politicians or factions that give you bonuses, like, for example, 15% gas extraction rate through fracking, or 10% trading prices increase when trading oil, so you can make more money when trading certain resources. So I know that was a lot today, but that was basically it. Those were my ideas, what I'd like to see in the game, and I would appreciate if you guys maybe just give me your opinion. What would you wish to be added to the game? Just leave me a comment, and thanks for watching. Though there's one more thing I would like the devs to change, and that is this hideous map. I mean, please, please, devs, give me something like this, something nice to look at. Maybe with mountains and rivers, trees and lakes. That shouldn't be too much to ask for, really. Just give me some graphics. Just just some nice graphics, not something from the 90s that gives me eye cancer. That's all I'm asking for.